Good morning, everyone. The sixth round of public hearings is being held as part of the national inquiry being conducted by the Commission on the impact of climate change on the human rights of Filipino people. This proceeding stems from a petition filed before the Commission docketed as CHR case number CHR-MI-2016-00001. The solemnity of the public hearing shall be upheld at all times. Respect should be accorded to everyone present. The clapping of hands and unnecessary remarks shall not be allowed and may be regarded as direct contempt of the inquiry panel. Cell phones should be turned off or put on silent mode while the proceedings are going on. All rise. The inquiry panel for today's proceedings are Inquiry Panel Chairman of the NICC Honorable Commissioner Roberto Eugenio T. Cadiz and Honorable Commissioner Karen S. Gomez Lumpit. Dr. Pedro Walpole, S.J. assists the Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines in this inquiry. Please remain standing for the national anthem and the ecumenical prayer. The prayer
As we gather here this morning, we are aware of a greater presence, a greater love and promise in life. The very air we breathe, the very land we draw our strength from, our food, our encouragement with our children, the joy we share in this landscape, we ask that we are truly able to celebrate life and God's presence amongst us. We are grateful for all of the blessings that we are given, and we take up today the challenge, full of heart, to care for all life and for all people. We ask blessing in this from the Almighty, from the Creator. Amen.
Everyone may now be seated.
We shall begin our session. Can we have the formal entries of appearance of counsels?
Good morning, Your Honors. Griselda Mayanda, respectfully appealing for the petitioners. We are ready. Good morning, Your Honors. Hasmina D. Paudak, respectfully appealing for the petitioners. We are ready.
Are there other counsels representing parties to this case? There being none, we continue to encourage the respondents to come. They can come anytime today. And to make representations if they wish to speak with the inquiry panel in whatever form or manner. Counsels for petitioners, are you ready to present your first witness?
Yes, Your Honors. We will call on our first witness this morning, Ms. Honolin Gonzalez.
Please swear in the witness. Gonzalez.
Your Honors, Ms. Honolin Gonzalez is a tropical storm syndrome, or WASHI, new survivor from Iligan City, Lanao del Norte. She's currently now based in Zamboanga del Sur. She's here to share her experience as a youth who lost her parents and elder brothers and was left with two younger brothers to take care of during the tropical storm syndrome in Iligan City. She will also share how it impacted her and her younger brother's basic human rights and changed her life as a survivor. Your Honor, before we proceed with her presentation, may I be allowed to ask preliminary questions regarding a document that she submitted to this Honorable Commission?
Please proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Hanalin. Can I call you Hanalin? Yes. Yes. You can understand English, right? Ms. Hanalin, there is this document entitled Salaysay ni Binibining Hanalin Gonzalez, consisting of 5 pages. Please kindly go over it. And tell this Honorable Commission if you do recognize this document. This box. On page 5 of this document, there appears a signature above the name Honolin Gonzalez, dated November 29, 2018. Can you please go over this signature and please tell this Honorable Commission whose signature is this? Akin po to. Ms. Honolin, you confirm and affirm the statements you mentioned in this document? Yes po. Your Honors, we'd like to manifest that this document entitled Salaysay ni Binibining Honolin Gonzalez, consisting of 5 pages dated November 29, 2018, was pre-marked as Exhibit Nonapol I to Nonapol I-4, and the signature of Ms. Honolin Gonzalez was pre-marked as Nonapol I-4-A. May we ask for confirmation from the clerk of the Commission?
Attorney Sagara.
Your Honor, confirming the manifestation of the counsels for petitioners as regards to the markings.
All right, please proceed to examining your counsel.
Your Honor, Ms. Honolin Gonzalez will be sharing her story in our vernacular, Filipino.
Ms. Gonzalez, you can now proceed to share the highlights of your story.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Bago ko po ibahagi ang aking karanasan sa Bagyong Sindong, gusto ko po munang magpasalamat sa oportunidad na binigay sa akin para ibahagi po ang aking karanasan sa Bagyong Sindong. Ako po si Hanelin Gonzalez, 25 taong gulang, tubong iliganin po at kasalukuyan pong naninirahan sa Brigada Dos Dinas, Zamboanga del Sur. Kasama ko po ang aking 2 kapatid at may isa po akong anak. Kasalukuyan po akong nag-aaral sa J. Celia State College at may kinuhing kursong Bachelor of Elementary Education, first year college po. Nung ako'y pinanganak hanggang 18 taong gulang, nagkaroon po ako ng masayang at kumpletong pamilya. Kahit mahirap po, buo at masaya po kaming pamilya. May matatawag po akong nanay. May matatawag po akong tatay. May matatawag po akong mga kuya. Kahit mahirap po kami, nagkakaisa po kami. Nararamdaman po namin yung pagmahal sa bawat isa. Ang tatay ko po ay isang barbero at yung mama ko po ay isang labandera. Pero kahit ganun po yung estado ng buhay namin, masaya po kami nabubuhay dito sa mundo. Dumating po yung panahon, December 17, 2011, yung buong pamilyang masaya, nagkakatuwaan, ay naging malungkot na. Nung ako'y sa 18 taong gulang, nagtatrabaho po ako sa isang department store bilang isang sales lady para po matustusan yung pangangailangan ng pamilya ko kasi po yung tatay ko po ay isang disabled po sa 2 paa at saka yung mama ko po disabled po sa isang kamay, kaya dapat po ako magtrabaho para matustusan yung pangangailangan namin. December 16 po, 7 p.m., galing po ako ng trabaho. Sinundo po ako ng aking ina habang walang tigil po na pag-ulan. Pagdating ko po sa bahay, yung senaryo po namin palaging tumatawa, nagbibiroan. Kasi ganun po kami. Kahit mahirap, may mararamdaman po kaming tuwa. Pagkaraan po ng mga 12 midnight ng December 16, tumaas na po yung tubig. Pumasok na po yung tubig sa bahay namin. Mga baywang po nun. Tapos kami pong pamilya ay nagkakatuwaan pa rin habang nagtatransfer po ng mga gamit patungo sa second floor ng bahay namin. Sa gabing iyon po, nakakayanan po namin yung magbiruan kahit may tubig na sa bahay namin. Tapos nung tumaas na po yung tubig, mga dibdib na po, nag-decide po ako. Sinabihan ko po yung kuya ko na mag-evacuate. Mag-evacuate po dun sa mataas na bahagi ng lugar namin, yung waiting shade. Dala ko po yung dalawa kong kapatid. Tapos apat kaming naglalakad sa tubig na taga-dibdib kasama yung kuya ko at dalawang nakakabuso kong kapatid. Tapos pagkarating po namin sa waiting shades, nakita po namin doon na may tubig po, taga-dibdib. Tapos nag-decide po yung kuya ko na ipatong kami sa bahay na may second floor. Doon iniwan niyo po kami. Kasi babalikan niyo po yung parents ko kasi para tulungan yung isa ko pang kuya kasi nga po disabled yung mga magulang ko. Pagkatapos po nun, hindi po sila nakaabot sa bahay na pinapatungan namin. Doon po sila sa isang bahay na mataas din kasi may nakapagsabi sa akin na isang survivor sa bahay na iyon na nandun daw yung pamilya ko. Mga 2 a.m. po ng December 17, nag-text po yung kuya ko sa kapitbahay namin. Kinukumusta niya po kami. Sabi niya, kumusta po yung tatlong kapatid ko. Tapos nung tinawagan po ng kapitbahay ko yung cellphone number ng kuya ko, hindi na niya po na-contact. Kasi bumagsak na po yung tinutuluyan nilang bahay. Tapos nung pagkaumagang yun, wala po sa isip namin na mawala yung pamilya ko. Dali-dali kaming umalis sa lugar kung saan nagkaroon ng malaking baha. Kasama ko po yung dalawang kapatid ko. Pagkaumaga, nakakita kami ng maraming patay, wasak na lugar. Wasak na mga bahay. Tapos nag-decide po ako na naiiwan ko po yung dalawang kapatid sa simbahan. Kasi po para hanapin yung mga magulang ko, yung pamilya ko po. Sa kabala po ng paghahanap ng isang araw, may maskin isa po wala po akong makita. Mga ilang araw po paghahanap ko, pinupuntahan ko yung mga pulinarya. Mga lugar na kung saan sabi nila may survivor doon. Pero wala po. Sa anim na missing po, wala pong kahit isa man lang na nakita ko po. Katapos po na ilang buwan, nabigyan po kami ng pagkakataon na tumira sa 10 City. Sa 10 City po, sa Tambo. Sa Tambo Terminal, malapit. Doon po kami nanirahan, kaming tatlong. Kahit mahirap buhay doon namin, pinipilit po namin maging masaya. Tinatadagan po namin yung loob namin. Nabuhay po kami sa 10 City po sa pamagitan po ng mga relief goods. Tapos pagkatapos po ng 10 City po, nag-decide po ako na mag-boarding house po kasi po hindi ko po nasigurado po yung kaligtasan ng dalawang kapatid. Kasi iniisip ko po yung kaligtasan nila. Kasi yung tent po, hindi po siguradong safe yun. Madali po ma-open. Kaya naghanap po ako ng boarding house. Sa ilang taon po kami po yung tatlo nagsama-sama na wala pong iwanan. Tapos nag-decide po ako na magtrabaho sa isang fast food para po matustusan yung pangangailangan ng mga kapatid ko. Para po mabigyan ko po sila ng mga kinakailangan nila, mga pagkain, mga kailangan sa school. Pero kahit ganun po, bilib po kasi ako sa dalawang kapatid. Never po silang nag-stop sa kanilang pag-aaral. Kahit na po, pupunta sila ng paaralan na minsan walang kinain. Malaki po yung epektong bagyong sentong sa aming buhay. Kasi po, nagkaroon po ako ng malaking responsibilidad sa buhay ko na hindi naman po dapat sana. Ako po yung tumayong inay, tatay at nakakatandang kapatid. Hindi ko po na-experience at magiging teenager po kung paano po maging isang masayang dalaga. Kasi po kailangan ko pong gampanan ang pagiging ina at itay sa dalawa ko pong kapatid. Gugustuhin ko man pong mag-aral noon. Pero hindi ko po makakayanan kasi po mas prioridad ko po yung pagtatrabaho kasi doon po kami kumukuha ng pang-araw-araw. Yung malaki pong epekto sa buhay namin, lalong-lalo na po sa dalawa ko pong kapatid. Palagi po nilang sinasabi na mas maganda po yung may mga parents kasi every meeting sa school, parents yung nag-a-attend eh. May malaki po silang jealousy po sa mga batang may mga magulang. Kasi po sa araw ng kalungkutan, kailangan po ng pakaparangay. Nandun po kasi yung mga magulang. Sabi po ng kapatid ko pong babae, na ate, gagraduate na ako ng high school. Sayang, wala yung mga magulang natin na aahit sana sa stage. Sabay biro ko naman, okay lang yun, nandito naman yung maganda mong ate. Sabi niya nakakaingit eh, kasi sana yung parents yung magdadala sa akin, sana si mama at si papa. Kaya ngayon po, humuhugot po ako ng lakas ng loob sa dalawa ko pong kapatid at sa aking anak. Kung nakasurvive man po kami sa bagyong Sendong, makakayanan po namin masurvive yung kahirapan na aming naranasan po ngayon. Kahit wala pong magulang, ikakayanin po namin mabuhay. Ngayon po, hindi na namin mararamdaman ang tunay na pagmamahal na galing sa magulang. Pero alam ko po, pero patuloy lang po kami sa buhay. At pagdating ng panahon, makaka-move on at makaka-out po kami. Hindi man po sa ngayon.
Maraming salamat, Hanley, sa iyong hirap magtanong. Okay. Hanley, gusto ko malaman kamusta ka ngayon pagkatapos ng 7 taong nakalipas.
Hindi ko po masasabi na okay po. Hindi ko po masasabing fully recovered po ako kasi every time po kasing umuulan, malakas po yung ulan. May trauma pa po kaming 3 eh. Nararamdaman pa po namin yung sakit. Naaalala pa rin po namin yung karanasan namin nung gabing yun.
Paano ka nabago o ang pananaw mo dahil sa iyong karanasan sa Sendong?
Naging matured po ako. Naging nanay at tatay. At naging responsable po ako. Instead na kailangan ko pong mag-enjoy kasi isang dalaga pero hindi po yun nangyari. Mas nagpursige po akong nagtrabaho para po maibigay yung mga pangangailangan ng kapatid ko nung pang-araw-araw po naming pagkain at sa pag-aaral po nila.
Nabanggit mo yung mga pangangailangan. Ano sa tingin mo yung mga pangangailangan na kailangan ng komunidad na dapat matugunan ng agaran, ng pamahalaan o ng mga taong gustong bigay tulong sa mga survivor na tulad mo?
Unang-una po is yung psychological para po sa mga nasandungan. Pangalawa po yung magkakandak po ng seminars para ma-aware po yung mapaghandaan po yung mga kalamidad na darating. Yun lang.
Nabanggit niyo yung psychological. Ang ibig sabihin mo ba dito yung psychosocial briefing ba?
Yes po.
Dumaan ka ba sa ganung proseso?
Hindi po.
Bilang isang survivor, Hanilin, huling tanong, mayroon ka ba mga mensahe o mayroon ka ba mensahe sa katulad mo, kabataan, na marahil hindi ka nag-iisa sa ganitong karanasan, lalo nung sumapit ang bagyong Sendong. Meron ka ba mensahe gustong sabihin?
Tatagan po na ng loob nila na kahit ano pong pagsubok na darating sa buhay, huwag po tayong susuko.
Maraming salamat, Hanili. Your Honors, that will be all for the legal representatives. If you do have questions, the witness is ready to answer them.
Commissioner Karen Dumpit will ask questions to the witness.
Magandang umaga, Hanili. Magandang umaga po. Nakikiramay kami sa inyo sa mga nawala mo sa buhay, sa mga kamag-anak na nawala mo sa buhay. Gusto ko lang malaman, dun sa pagsalaysay mo ng kwento, parang hindi ko po narinig yung nagawa ng gobyerno bago nagkaroon ng Sendong, sa evacuation. Meron ka bang narinig na o nalaman na pinapa-evacuate na kayo ng gobyerno, ng lokal na gobyerno?
Wala po, ma'am. Malilate po yung information nila.
Gano'ng ka-late?
Pagbaha na po, tapos nawalan po kasi ng kuryente. wala na, hindi na po namin alam na may gano'n yung pong kalakas na bagyo.
Pero sa radyo ba, meron kang narinig? O kung nakinig ba kayo ng radyo noon? Alam niyo ba na masidi o malakas yung bagyong Sendong na dadating?
Alam po namin na may bagyo po, hindi po namin narinig na ganun po kalakas yung bagyong Sendong.
Tapos nung nag-evacuate kayo, walang umikot, hindi nakaikot, walang nag-survey dun sa area.
Wala na po kasi hindi po makapasok yung mga rescuer po sa lugar namin.
Nung nag-transfer kayo, no, di ba dun sa two-story house na nandun kayo, nung inilipat mo yung mga kapatid mo sa simbahan, paano mo nalaman na doon dapat pupunta?
Kasi doon po kami nagsisimba.
So, inisip mo lang na mas safe sila doon habang naghahanap ka doon sa iyong kapamilya.
Yes.
After doon sa simbahan, ilang araw bago kayo lumipas sa tent city?
Doon po kami nagpapasko eh. Di ko po ma-remember po kung ilang araw po kami doon. Kasi bago po yung sa Tent City, nakatira po kami bumalik po kasi kami sa likod ng lugar namin, which is yung subdivision, mga sirang bahay. Kasi sumama kami sa isa kong tito, na nabagyuhan din kami nakatira. Tapos nabigyan po kami ng pagkakataon na mag-apply daw po sa Tent City. Dun po, kaya po kami nakatira din sa Tent City.
So ilang araw kayo naglagi o ilang buwan sa Tent City?
Halos 1 ata.
1 year. May mga lugar ba doon na tinatawag na safe space for women tsaka children? Na tinatawag, walang lugar na designated para magkaroon ng safer place within the tent city.
Wala po. Halo-halo na po kasi doon.
Sinong nag-manage ng tent city?
Hindi ko po na maalala kung IDSWD pala.
Okay. Wala nang ibang naitulong kasi ang sinabi mo binigyan ng dito sa salaysay mo na nabigyan ng 50,000 pesos gawa nga nung nagtatrabaho yung kapatid mo, yung kuya mo sa isang kumpanya at binigyan kayo. Meron pa bang ibang nagbigay ng tulong sa inyo? Gobyerno man o hindi?
Meron pa po yung hindi ko po maalala yung mga pangalan kasi sometimes po may sabi na Hanilin may magbibigay sa iyo ng pera. Pag narinig po yung istorya namin, para mag-donate po sila ng tag 4,000. Tapos yung mga counselor po yata sa syudad namin, yun po.
Wala na pong ibang naitulong ang gobyerno. Bukod dun sa NCT, tapos yung donation ng mga counselors, wala ba silang programang nabigay sa inyo para makuha ninyo yung mga services?
Yung sa bayanihan po, yung pabahay, kasi hindi ko po na-avail kasi po, kinakailangan po kasi mag-community service, yung
Cash for work.
Oo, cash for work. Dapat araw-araw din ina-attendance. Pero hindi ko po kasi yun magawa kasi mas inuuna ko po yung trabaho ko kaysa sa mga ganun po kasi yun yung pinakaunang pangangailangan namin.
Maraming salamat.
I have no questions for the witness. Counsels, do you have follow-up questions for your witness?
None, Your Honors.
All right, the witness may now be excused. Pwede ka nang maraming salamat sa iyong pagdalo dito at nakikiramay kami sa nangyari sa iyong pamilya. Councils, are you ready to present your next witness?
Good morning again, Your Honors. Our second resource person and witness for today is Dr. Glenn Roy Paraso. We will call him to the witness.
Please swear in the witness. Yes.
Your Honors, Dr. Glenn Roy Paraso is the Executive Director of Mary Johnston Hospital, and he is a health expert of the National Technical Panel of Experts of the Climate Change Commission. We are presenting him today to share his expertise on the topic of climate justice, particularly in the health sector and in the development of a health adaptation strategy in relation to climate change. And before we proceed, Your Honors, may we be allowed some preliminary questions? Good morning, Dr. Glenn.
Good morning.
Just for documents, there is a document here consisting of 21 pages. Could you please take a look at this and identify it if you recall that document?
Yes, I was the one who did this study.
In the last page of this document, Dr. Glenn, there's a signature above your name. Could you please?
This is my signature.
Thank you. Do you confirm and affirm the contents of this document? Now, there's another document.
Before you proceed, Counsel, so that you will not get confused, there's a pre-marking there, right?
Yes.
It's pre-marked as Exhibit 1.
Notable J.
J.
And
our clerk will confirm the pre-marking later on. Just so we know what document you're asking the witness to identify.
Thank you, Your Honors. And this next document, Dr. Glenn, which has been pre-marked as Notable K, consisting of 2 pages. Could you please take a look at that document?
Yes, receive it.
Okay. So do you confirm and affirm the contents of this curriculum vitae? The third document consists of 35 pages and is a PowerPoint presentation remarked as Notable L. Could you please take a look at this document?
Yes, it is.
So you confirm and affirm the contents of this document. And the last document remarked as Notable M, Second National Communications Report consisting of 50 pages. Please take a look at that document as well.
Yes.
So do you confirm and affirm the contents of this document? Now, for the record, Your Honors, the statement of Dr. Glenn Paraso has been pre-marked as Notable J to Notable J-20. His signature has been pre-marked as Notable J-20-A. His curriculum vitae, consisting of 2 pages, has been pre-marked as Notable K to Notable K-1. His printed PowerPoint presentation, consisting of 35 pages, has been pre-marked as Notable L to Notable L-34. And lastly, the Second National Communications Health Sector Report, consisting of 50 pages, has been pre-marked as Notable M to Notable M-49. All of this, Your Honors, have been pre-marked last December 7, 2018. May we therefore request a confirmation.
Do you confirm the pre-markings?
Confirming the pre-markings, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Please proceed to examining your witness.
Thank you, Your Honors. Dr. Glenn Roy Paraso may now give a summary of his presentation.
Yeah, Your Honors, before you right now is a PowerPoint presentation on looking at climate change in the health nexus. In as much as I'm only given a certain time to present this, I will try to cut some slides, which may be not so much germane to our discussions right now. So if you will see, the outline here is looking at weather and climate. So this is looking at climate change in the health nexus. It's a relation. The outline is such that we will look at weather and climate, sources of greenhouse gases, and the climate change and health impacts. I hope to be fast with the science of this so that we can go to the health impacts. So the next few slides will just show us what weather and climate is as a difference. Weather is the everyday that we see, but climate is something that's more like 30 years or 50 years or 100 years with its length. And so climate occurs over more seasons and is in a longer setting. The next slide will just show you what some of the most destructive storms that we've had and how much it has cost our economy. The next three slides will just show us what are greenhouse gases, and you can see the carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide as the three highest where we get our greenhouse gases, and it has been stipulated that it is from the greenhouse gases where we have warming of the global temperature. The next slide will just show us that in the Philippines, 55% of the greenhouse gases actually come from energy. The next slide will show us that in that atlas, the Philippines is very small with regard giving out producing greenhouse gases. Now, China is there at 7.7 gigatons, and the US. So we have, you see that red square, we are such a small contributor to the carbon dioxide emissions, and yet the effect of the global climate warming is that we are the ones that are at the forefront, even as typhoons come around 21 typhoons per year in the Philippines. So it's inversely proportional on the effect of our giving out carbon dioxide emissions. Just to show you that the IPCC report in the next few slides have correlated. This slide is that greenhouse gases are already related to the human activities, so it's already anthropogenic in the IPCC report. The next slide will show us that in the last 300,000 years, the carbon dioxide concentrations and temperature as it increases is very much related to each other. There's a direct correlation between the two. This has been the studies, and so the next slide will now show us that the global warming is really already human induced. So while there are three lines here right now, the black line is the observations of the scientists. These are the three observation lines. If it is the blue line would show us that there's a volcanic and solar. That's the normal causes of heat, right? But the red line will show us, in addition to the natural, which is volcanic, solar, anthropogenic has been added. And you will see that the red line is a runaway from the blue line, which should have been, if we did not have human-induced activities, the blue line would be where we are at right now. But you can see because of the Industrial Revolution and the use of all of these fossil fuels, human activities have really added on to climate change and temperature change. In the next two slides, IPCC report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is an aggregation of scientists worldwide. It has been seen that human systems have, in the next slide, let's go to the next slide. I've been seeing that the reports have showed that anthropogenic activities have actually caused a 1 degree centigrade global warming since the Industrial Revolution. And the following bullet points will just show us what can happen even as we project into the future. And that the fourth bullet point there is that saying at 2 degrees, if there's a change of 2 degrees temperature, the loss of global annual catch of marine fisheries are affected. So you can see as this is happening, it affects both the natural course of things. And in the next slide, at B5.2, specifically for health, it is saying that it's going to affect human health primarily with negative consequences in the first bullet point. Therefore, urban heat. Therefore, the other risks are also there. No? I'd like to highlight the fourth bullet: vector-borne diseases. are projected to increase with warming of 1.5 to 2 degrees due to the potential shift. Also, in the geographic range, the mosquitoes are also able, the vectors are also able to fly farther off and replicate somewhere at a higher rate. Um, the next slide will just show us how global temperature is already going up. And in this report of IPCC in the year 2000, they were already at 4.5. So this is very much already not comfortable for a lot of the sectors in our society. The next slide will just show us that IPCC has said that in the yellow highlights there are heavy rainfall events more frequent and increasing the intense tropical cyclone. So these are very likely, but the first three lines there, fewer cold nights and days, frequent hot days, and frequent warm spells are all virtually certain and very likely to happen. Let me skip over the next two slides and just looking at RCPs or representative concentration pathways. Yeah, just to show you what the scenario is going to be like. You see the color is more intense at RCP 8.5. Let's move to the more to the health impacts. Let's move to the next slide. You can see now that health is a determinant. That's the one in the red tab, and mediates climate change impacts. It has two effects, Your Honors, both a direct and an indirect. The direct is they have better assessments for the direct effects, no? But for the indirect effects, they are having harder assessments. So, however, the indirect effects are the ones that dominate. The effects are indirect and such that it's hard to measure these effects. The next three slides will show you SDGs, and I think you know about this already. This is the Sustainable Development Goals. So you see that Goal 2, Goal 3, Goal 6, Goal 7, and in the next slide, Goal 15. These are all SDGs, and yet they're all related to health, including that climate action. So what am I saying? In the next slide, you will see that there is really no one-to-one linear correspondence between climate change and health because it affects the other sectors, right? So it's very complicated. So health, as it affects other sectors, and sectors as it affects health. Now, in our Philippine Constitution, in the next two slides, we can see there that the right to health is stipulated in state policies as much as in the social justice and human rights in Article 13. And specifically for Section 11, it says that the state shall adopt an integrated and comprehensive approach to health development, which shall endeavor to make essential goods, health, and other social services available, take note, to all the people at affordable cost. So there's a prioritization of the needs for health. Section 12 and 13 also establishes an effective food and drug regulatory system. And Section 13 is looking at a special agency for disabled persons for the rehabilitation self-development. So this are all parts of, if you will look at it, health as stipulated in the constitutions. The next slide is quite a busy slide there. But just to show us that the human right to health is also internationally protected, to which we're also signatories, right? WHO, Article 22, and Article 24, Convention on the Rights of the Child. So you can see that in those declarations, we can see also highlighting health as a human right. The next two slides will just show us what are the key implications actually brought about by climate change as it impacts health. Implication number one just shows us that in as much as there is a natural climate variability already, human-induced climate change has enhanced it. So, mas mabilis ngayon yung effects ng frequent storms, hindi lang frequency, more intense, yung mga extreme weather events. Either it's the cold part or the hot part. And as I was saying in the second bullet, it says that while the health impacts are greatly mediated, there are non-health impacts which you call social health determinants. No? So poverty, education, gender, culture. You see, these are other mediating factors which add on to health. So actually, hindi health ang dahilan. So let's say if you have poverty, you become more vulnerable to the climate impacts. And then if you don't have the monies to go to the hospital, and your health is not supported because you don't have the economic capacity. These are mediations also of non-climate factors on health. Um, there are other environmental factors, geography. The Philippines is an archipelagic country. So you can see that, when climate change affects the whole of the Philippines, your situation is going to be very different where you are located with regards to that. Now, the other key implications, the next slide is looking at disease transmission dynamics. Now, this is as what I was telling you a while ago. The vector example for malaria is actually a mosquito. Now, if the mosquito can replicate faster because of the enabling of a temperature range, which is in the Philippines right now, right? That band of 22 degrees to 30 is where we are right now. And, I'm not saying that this mosquito will bite you because it has already the disease. But there are more chances because of the rapid population increase in giving birth that these mosquitoes will have the chance to carry the disease as vectors. As I was saying a while ago, given the enabling environment, they can even fly to the next barangay. So you can see if it's a virgin population and these mosquitoes can fly farther off because of longer drought, they have living, what do you call this, the lifespan is longer, it will really affect disease transmission. Now, also, our present state of health systems, we are not really at, public health is something that we're still challenged within the Philippines in the DOH context. And on top of public health, we already have still, tuberculosis, measles, and all of this. You put on top of that climate change. So even, you put that NDP on already something that's burden. It's really hard to manage all of this, given that we have limited resources for health. The third slide on the key implication, extreme weather events. We had our witness a while ago from Sendong. 2009 Ondoy and Yolanda in 2013, the latest, which is 5 years ago. You will see now that the extreme weather events are becoming more frequent. I remember it was only Typhoon Yuling in 1972. That was very remarkable. But now, we have them every 5 years, every 3 years. It's not only the frequency, it is the intensity. We don't hear about, Yuling was signal number 2. But, Yolanda is category 5. The latest is also category 5. It's very different. So you see the intensity also is different. Third slide, third point. If we adapt to climate change and the health impacts, it's going to be one of the drivers of sustainable development. So if we're able to adapt and address the health impacts of climate change, we will also, in effect, be looking at sustainability. The next slide will show you just the social determinants of health. No? So makikita natin that the climate change and impacts on health are actually impacted by these other factors: poverty, geographical isolation, access to health, conflict even in southern areas. If there is conflict, it affects health, educational attainment, on whether decision-making processes on seeking health, better health-seeking behaviors, it's not there because, they don't even want to wash their hands. Culture also has an effect on that. So just to show you that in the next 2 slides, direct and indirect, right? That's after that slide. Yeah, there are direct and indirect effects of health from climate change. And I was just saying that the indirect parameters are the more harder to measure. Let's go to the next slide, the climate change and health pathways. Sige po, yan. Again, this slide just shows you that number 1 there and number 2, there are direct and mediating processes. right? So it's really a complicated relationship between health and climate change. The next few slides will just show you the health impacts on heat stress, food security, water security. So you can see that really it affects that also. Um, Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to show you the heat stress that has increased over time because of changing of our climate. Water-borne infection, vector-borne infections. So cholera, typhoid, these other diseases are also manifest already in us and have been with us but have been increasing in number of cases. Um, yeah, so let me go to that slide where we have typhoid fever cases, please. Next slide. Next slide. Go ahead. So there's a graph there that will show you. Go ahead, next please. Next please. These are just the other, related diseases. Zika. Zika is also related to the vectors, and we did not have Zika before, but apparently it's with us already now. Yeah. Okay. This case, typhoid fever cases. These are DOH slides. Number of cases is the red one, right? 1998, very significant year. Go ahead, next slide, please. Next graph. Malaria cases. Okay, and then the next slide. All right, dengue cases. It all happened, but all of them happened in 1998. Yung matataas lahat ng mga kwan, ano? That's because there was a drought in 1998, and that was the longest drought that we had. I think it was lasting around 8 months. And all of these cases went up because of that increased temperature. And so as I was telling you earlier, the time frame really is very important. Parasite development happened in that time. Right, let's go. I'm ending up already. Of course, there's but they're indirect, which is floods, droughts are indirect causes, and because of the droughts, we will also have malnutrition because of food security that is affected. So just to tell you again that particulate matter also affects us. These are small ppms. These are small dust in the air, and they can also be flying farther away, as you would see in the last forest fires of Indonesia. Nakaabot din po sila sa atin because of this, and air pollution as it is. Let me turn your attention to the gaps. So I can finish already. These are the gaps that we see in the health sector. Long-term data regarding health and climate is still a challenge for us, and assessment tools. Not much studies have been done on health and climate, the correlation studies. And then we also have a problem with integrating climate change and health in the planning process, because it's for the most part, ang hirap kasi i-budget dahil we don't know how much the effect on climate change is. Integrated long-term surveillance is also a gap that we can see. The next slide will just show us adaptation strategies. So if we're able to look at climate-sensitive diseases and the burden of climate-sensitive diseases, both as studies, we will be able to come up with sana in field health, like for example, a health financing mechanism for climate-sensitive diseases, so that in the areas where they are more vulnerable, field health will be able to fund, like for example, a malaria or a dengue package, and of course, I do not want to belittle the behavior change, climate and health education that has to happen, because behavior has to change for us. For adaptation studies, strategies, there's a PPP, because the government cannot do it alone. We should climate-proof our health facilities, and again, basically having safe drinking water and sanitation. Second to the last slide, uncertainty, as we are right now, is not an excuse. We should be preventive and proactive rather than reactive in our strategies. The last slide there is a tipping point slide. while health is alright, it's just saying there, we don't know where the tipping point is because it's going to be irreversible. We don't know if 2 degrees is that tipping point, and we cannot reverse anymore the effects of climate change on all of the other sectors as much as it affects health. So, like fever, we have to have paracetamol as early as possible before you go into the antibiotics. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glenn. Your Honors, may we be allowed to
Please go
ask
ahead.
questions? Thank you, Dr. Glenn, again for your presentation. You mentioned about the several gaps
Right.
in the current public health efforts, but you also mentioned about the preventive adaptation strategy. Could you give us a sense of where we are now in terms of the current actions, initiatives, as well as resources of the government?
Thank you very much for the question. For policy, we already have existing policies on how to respond to climate change and health. Actually, the Climate Change Commission was brought into development and is now doing the policy part on looking at what they call this, what are the ways that we can respond to climate change. Now, as part of the Climate Change Commission, we also have that we call the People's Survival Fund, PSF they call it. This is a fund that is being used right now for projects which can adapt and or mitigate climate change to the LGU level. So now, I think there have been quite a number of proposals that have been approved on climate change, and part of that response, and part of that is the health response. I think I answered the question, and that's up to governments to. With regard to the DOH right now, there is also already responses to climate change. No? There's a policy which we were able to put in place in 2009 also with the DOH with regard projects and programs in response to the climate change and health impacts. I guess one other gap would be health financing, as I was saying a while ago, because our health financing in field health will only cover so much of diseases. If we can come up with a health financing specific to climate sensitive diseases, then this will also lessen the vulnerability. It's lessening the vulnerability because it's too expensive for us to be curative, and we have to be in the adaptive sense. No? So health financing is actually adaptive, the adaptation mechanism for us. So that gives us as a security net for climate change.
But besides the government, how about on the private initiatives? Are there other efforts now or actions that in a way would address these gaps?
Yeah. We're still at the beginning, because it's very hard to educate doctors with regard to climate change, because the environment is something that while we were not trained to look at diseases coming from the environment, we were trained to look at diseases as biological. That's why we prescribe you antibiotics, diba? But it's very hard to prescribe change your place of living. Because let's take for example asthma. Asthma is not a disease; it is actually an allergy, which is affected by the environment. So a change in the climate, weather, I should say, will trigger the infection. But we cannot give an antibiotic for that. Diba? We give you antihistamines, pangtanggal ng kate, and yet that is a climate-sensitive disease. Now, I do not know if field health covers allergy. I don't think so. So, ang hirap sa mga ganun, unless you, therefore, the question is, I'm sorry,
the private,
so in the private sector, we already have, we have our friends who are in the mining industry, in all of these industries, which are also potential polluters of climate, or enhances the effects of all of these climate changes. While they have they call them CSRs, or corporate social responsibilities, hindi lahat ay tinitignan yung climate effects, specifically on health. Diba? While some of them would just give you a token medical mission, there is no comprehensive response yet to what will our industry contribute to the climate, worsening of climate. Wala pa silang ganon na efforts na private sector. But again, we are in the education stage of that. But they have a very big potential to respond to the climate change effects.
Now, building on that comment, Doc, what role would these corporations play? Because I think you're aware that in this particular case, the respondent companies, which are made to answer or in connection with the human rights impacts of climate change. But since you mentioned that, and you mentioned as well that they are not adequate to address, what role should they play?
They should play a major role, because, like for example, if I'm an oil producing company, let's say, so fossil fuel is actually the cause of climate, global warming, right? So the burning fossil. If they can shift to looking at renewables, then that's going to be a big change, So baka later in the future, hindi pa muna ngayon, but you can show them already that what are the benefits of work and compensation and profits if you look at renewables rather than fossil fuels. And then, sabi ko nga, look at the health impacts of that. So, well, their role is, they have a major role central to this. If they can shift their, fossil fuel production rather to renewables, or to solar even, and that's where they put their monies, then I think that's going to be both a good business sense for them, and it's going to profit them kasi hindi naman natatanggal yung araw eh. It's here forever, so if they can harness that and go into renewables, it will be better.
My last question, do you have any models for health, addressing health impacts relating to climate change? What are there efforts to actually pursue that? Yes.
Yes. As I was telling you, it's complicated. Okay? So ngayon, ang nangyayari in mga studies are assessments. Because we also lack the tools. Because it is for the most part correlative. So you have to look at temperature, you have to look at rainfall, you have to look at these parameters as it affects health. And then you put on top of that the social determinants, poverty, education. So it has to really be a modeling that is multidisciplinary and multifactorial. So are there studies? Yes, pero ang ginagawa lang muna is number of diseases. Number of those, it's very specific kasi beyond that, as I was telling you, what if the mosquito is 1,000 of them or 100,000 of them? Hindi naman natin mabilang si mosquito. So ang tinitingnan na lang, ilan ang kaso ng malaria? Kasi yun yung, directly we can count that and then come up with an intervention for it. So yes, modelings are happening even at the international level, but they are climate sensitive specific diseases.
In relation to that, because it's a good point, are there resources being allocated to pursue that pathway?
At the moment, we're still burdened with public health and primary health care. So, yes, we've been talking to PCHRD and other WST to look further into researches towards that track. We're all in the technical review stage, but to tell you upfront also, hindi ganun karami ang studies on looking at the climate change and health impacts. So it's still very much virgin territory, and there's a lot of opportunity to learn from it.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Glenn Parasi. Your honors.
Dr. Walpo.
Thank you, Dr. So this is very nice to have it laid out in a Philippine context. If I can just try to update myself a little. What were the impacts of heat stress in 2017? What was the estimated impact? How many people were affected?
I will not be able to give you that number, but what I can say is that considerably higher because 2017 was, I think, on record the hottest year also, and on record for the Philippines. And we were going through the cases both in Tuguegarao, in Nueva Ecija, and reports at the different regional hospitals have already increased in the number of cases for heat stress. That's why um, we are coming up with a study on coming up with a scoring system with pag-asa on heat stress and coming up with an advisory like the flooding. It's at level 3 yellow or whatever. Don't go out anymore if you're at this stage.
Yeah, it didn't receive much coverage or much awareness at all. You're talking about water security. Which are our most vulnerable cities in the Philippines to water insecurity?
The water security, I should say, is an indirect impact of climate change. It's going to be because of the drought, long levels of drought. Then we will not be able to have rainfall.
Yes.
And even with the water levels going down with our aquifers, if there are long cases of drought. So but we would say that for water security, it would be those areas which are in the provinces. Alright? These are the areas which have, for the most part, rain-fed farms. And reports have it that, as we were saying also, in the areas where there's increase in temperature and drought, like Tuguegarao, and also in Nueva Ecija, these are areas which are very much vulnerable to water security areas. Yeah.
A further point there is partly in relation to that. Have we looked at in the Philippines as to whether there is really a tipping point in terms of food security?
Okay.
Is it a point where our lands will not produce? 98 was the gravest example.
Right. That's a very good question because right now the solution is to import rice. So I guess there already is I don't know if it's artificial or not, but there is really a shortage because the yield right now is not that high. It has gone down. And food security then becomes very much a inter-country solution, right? So in the Philippines, the mere fact that we're already importing rice means that it's either in the management of our lands or in the effect of all of this long-term drought.
One last question, if I may. In terms of the IPCC special report of 1.5, does that give a greater urgency and accuracy to what you're saying, or do we just continue as normal?
No, because it should not be business as usual, but business unusual. Because responding and adaptation measures don't happen overnight. Yes, it is becoming serious because climate change is very insidious. Before you know it, it's already here, and it's not in our consciousness on how to put it in our budgets, how it affects the health system. For consideration, yes, we should already be working now if you want to be preventive. But I'd rather that we be, at this point in time, it's already here, so we have to adapt. And the urgency is very serious because, as I was telling you, we don't know what the tipping point is, where our systems cannot anymore respond to the climate impacts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Doctor, I noticed that you're a member of the panel of technical experts that work in collaboration with the Climate Change Commission. My first question is, how many and who are the members of this technical panel?
Okay, we have a diverse set of people. I think right now there's around 14 of us in our panel. They're experts from oceans and energy and forestry. Um, we have engineers looking at oil. So these are the different parts in the health part of
How often do you meet this technical panel?
we meet on a quarterly basis.
And how would you describe the relationship between this panel of technical experts and the commission itself?
Right. The panel of technical experts acts as an advisory committee to the Climate Change Commission. What happens is that they will ask us on, like, I would say, what's the latest on, let's say, forestry. How does it affect in the future? How is it going to affect us as to carbon sequestration and all of that? And if there are projects or proposals that are being handed, given by the different LGUs to the Climate Change Commission, they let it pass through us so that we can comment on the technical aspects of it. So I comment on the health aspects, somebody comments on if there is a section there that has to do with the proposal on health impacts, the proposal on energy. Yeah, so we act as both a policy and technical experts advisory group to the Climate Change Commission.
And how are your recommendations being translated into policy changes and programs of action by the government?
Right. So legislations on, let's say, water use, legislations on energy, and diversifying energy sources. That's where we give that, so that in the latest Climate Change Commission Consciousness Week, there were quite a number of policies which were given out already, and we were party to the what you call this, the technical aspect of drawing those policies, both locally and internationally. Even as you know, in the next conference of the parties, there is a Philippine position, and then we are party to putting input into that position.
Would you say, how long have you been a member of this technical?
I think I was a member in 2009 or 10. So that's
up to date,
up to the present right now.
And would you say that your recommendation, are you personally satisfied with the recommendations that are being sent to the commission and their actions on it?
Yeah. Well, we know that there's a bureaucracy that's in place, and so you know, while we are inputting into that, there are other legislators who are questioning always that portion. So, would I be satisfied? That's my answer. So we still have to make it faster because we have a budget. The government has a budget for climate change. Malaki po yan, ano? And yun which is in the People's Survival Fund. So it depends if the province will be able to give an LGUs, or the LGUs will be able to give a proposal on climate change response. That's where that fund goes into. And that fund, you know, I think it's 1 billion every year. It just adds up. And then if there's no drawdown, it's very hard to, you know, I think it's now being managed by the Development Bank of the Philippines, the financial aspect. But we give, you know, the inputs to the technical aspects of the proposals. Yeah, so we're starting, but we're learning because it's so hard to get your proposal up to those people. It's also hard because not all of the LGUs have proposal skills kasi hindi naman yun ang forte nila. So we also have to teach them that. So support mechanisms for that also. And then not all of the proposals are actually climate change related. They become, you know, they ask for bridges, they ask, that's in the era. They think that the bridge is a response to climate change. So that proposal is shot down kagad. So it's really hard to correlate because
if you were to make one or two important recommendations regarding the mandate and the exercise of mandate of the Climate Change Commission, what would they be?
Okay. I think our one recommendation would be to really put them into the budgets, not a policy that not only, I know this is starting already, a policy that mandates LGUs to put in the climate change impacts as part of their budgeting mechanism. Because, I'm there for 3 years, let's say I'm here, right? I'm only there for 3 years, so I will not budget for climate change. I'm out in 3 years anyway. So it can be such that it's instituted so that climate change response is not an overnight thing. So it happens so that's one, putting climate change and health in the budgets. And then I think they're starting to tag them already, which are climate change effects. That also is a very good recommendation from my end. The possibility of tagging in the budgets, which are actually climate change and health impacts. And lastly, of course, for specifically for health, as I was saying, what is climate financing, specifically health insurance for climate change and health? Yeah, I think this point.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paraso. Commissioner Karen Dumpik, do you have any questions?
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to have a better picture of how climate financing is. Do you have any models that
right now, for example, GEF, that's a big fund. And then I think that's more or less the biggest fund that's here right now. There are other NGOs that are into this. The EU is also giving funding for climate change. GIZ. These are, I think, bilateral relationships that we have with them, government to government, where they look at climate financing. So there's still ongoing yung Clean Development Mechanism, CDM they call it. Pero medyo mas ng konti yun, kasi that's like carbon taxing
nothing on climate change impacts and health?
No, that is very, that one is still in the works.
Here in the Philippines, yes. But in other countries, do they have?
Yeah, because they already have, like, for example, malaria studies. It's just a climate-sensitive disease. So dengue studies already. So they're more at the international level and have not really trickled down to Asia. Ours is more on the assessment type, vulnerability assessment of health. So mas yung ganyan pa, tinitingnan nila yung different factors affecting health as an impact of climate change. Yeah, these are starting assessment studies. So we're not yet in the implementation stage. I guess the People's Survival Fund should have the implementation part of the assessment studies.
On the People's Survivors Fund, who vets the proposals of the local government?
It's usually the governor. So, yung kanilang Committee on Health, sila yung nag-draw up ng proposals.
And then they submit to
the PSF, to the Climate Change Commission directly.
And then it's the PSF that approves?
Yeah, the PSF approves, and then the funding mechanism is through DBP. So, depende sa proposal nila kung how much it's going to cost, if it's multi-phase, 3 years, whatever.
So, is there a board?
Yes, PSF has a board.
So, who are the members of those?
I don't know. So, kasi kami naman is only giving inputs to the PSF. PSF will give it to us and then we'll say, okay, this is a very good health component, approve this much, technically this, and then go back to them because they'll be the ones to.
You mentioned something about coming up with like similar to what we have in typhoon signals for heat.
Yes, for heat.
Did I get you right?
Yes.
That hasn't been instituted yet.
Not yet. It's going to be worked on yet. I'm working with it with Pagasa and the UST.
So what's the timeline for that?
I think the study itself is around 3 years to at least get at a cohort of temperatures over time and the number of cases, because we're going to directly correlate it to the cases that are being seen at the different government hospitals. So yeah, around 3 years po yung study na yun.
Okay, and you started when?
We are at the technical review stage with the
So for year one pa lang.
Yeah, we're still there at year one. So yeah, kasi we still have to have several areas of pilot studies that will determine kung saan yung mataas ang temperatures, and then where there is a meteorologic station so that we can correlate cases and study and temperature.
In the technical panel, you said there were 14 members. Are there members that represent, let's say, education sector? Or
at this point, I don't think so.
Would you say that perhaps maybe we should also pay attention to public civic education about climate change and health impacts?
I was saying that also a while ago. The behavioral communications change should happen because both with doctors and patients, no, kasi it's not in our radar to look at the environment as a cause of diseases. So definitely, that health education is very important.
Not only health-seeking behavior, but safety-seeking behavior.
Yes, yeah. Because, let's say, diba, in a flood, diba? So, even before the flooding, diba, meron na tayo sa TV,
yes,
right? Pero hindi siya naman talaga tinitingnan. And flooding has become a way of life for us. Like leptospirosis in floods, tumataas yung mga kaso niyan. While there are advisories from the UH, everybody still swims in the flood.
And that's where behavioral communication comes in, because perhaps it's not enough to issue advisories, but to ensure that proper behavior comes after that. It's a call to action also. We communicate.
You know, it's an irony. Like, for example, Malabon, Navotas, they're always inundated. So, how will I say my health education there when transportation is by boat from one place to the other? So, I just have to go to the market and I have to go through water. So, ano talaga, it's also geography specific. But yes, health-seeking behavior and safety is a concern to change that behavior towards adaptation.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Anne.
Councils, you have further questions? All right, thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Glenn.
We're 30 minutes ahead of time. Do you want to proceed to your third witness already and have an early lunch break? Or do you want to have a coffee break first?
Our third resource person is already here. We will call our third resource person, Your Honors. Our third resource person is not new into this conversation. She's Miss Loretta Ann Rosales, the former chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights. She also held the position as a Philippine representative to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission in 2016, and a three-term party list representative of Akbayan Citizens Action Party. She's currently a special lecturer at De La Salle College of St. Benilde, chair emeritus of Akbayan Citizens Action Party, and also, among others, a member of the Philippine Coalition for the International Criminal Court and a member of the ASEAN Working Group Mechanism. We call on Ms. Rosales to the stand.
Welcome, ex-chairman Rosales. Thank you for coming here. Can we have the witness sworn in?
Please certify that the vote.
I do. Ito, bago ba to? Is this new?
Counsel, please proceed.
Your Honors, Ms. Rosales was invited by the petitioners for her to share her expertise on the topic of why human rights and gender lens are important to contribute to the national narrative on major carbon producers and their impact on the Philippine environment and economy. Before we proceed with the presentation of Ms. Rosales, may we be allowed to ask preliminary questions regarding the documents that she submitted?
Please go ahead.
Your Honors, Ms. Rosales submitted to us 3 documents which were pre-marked earlier this morning. First is a statement of Ms. Loretta Ann Rosales consisting of 2 pages, pre-marked as non-pool N to non-pool N-1. The signature of Ms. Loretta Ann Rosales, pre-marked as non-pool N-1-A. Her curriculum vitae consisting of 2 pages, pre-marked as non-pool O to non-pool O-1. And finally, a printed PowerPoint presentation entitled Climate Change and Human Rights, consisting of 8 pages, pre-marked as non-pool P to non-pool P-7. Before we ask for the confirmation from the clerk of our commission, may we be allowed to present this to Ms. Rosales for her confirmation.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Rosales. Can I call you Ms. Rosales or Ma'am Etta?
Just call me Etta.
Okay. I'm not comfortable with just Etta. I'll just add Ma'am Etta. Ma'am Etta, I have here 3 documents. Please go through these documents. And can you please confirm to this Honorable Commission if these are the documents that you submitted earlier?
Yes, they are.
Let me take this first document, the statement of Loretta Ann P. Rosales, consisting of 2 pages. There's a signature above the name Loretta Ann P. Rosales, dated December 11, 2018. Please go over it and tell this Honorable Commission if this is your signature.
Yes, that's mine.
Mr. Rosales, you confirm and affirm the statements you mentioned in the statement of Loretta Ann Rosales. Thank you, that would be all, Mr. Rosales.
Before you proceed, Attorney Esguerra, will you confirm the pre-markings?
Confirming the pre-markings as manifested by counsels, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Please proceed now, counsels.
Mata, you can now start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, may I express my appreciation for this invitation. Actually, I'd like to qualify the introduction. I have no expertise in this matter. I think that I'm just as, good as anybody else. We're all in the learning process with respect to cultivating human rights or giving human rights and gender lens in this terrible complex issues of climate change. So I've had some practice
as former chair of the Commission on Human Rights, we have, as a matter of fact, come up with a primer on rights, responsibilities, and the Ruggie framework. So I'll probably be using this essentially, and I shall try to bring out, start first with what I feel I can contribute to, having been invited as a resource person to the Commission on Human Rights. I think that, can we change this? Let me change the next. I think that maybe my contribution can help in a proposal on how civil society groups, and I've been talking to some of them a while ago while I was listening to Dr. Paraso, is that his name, who gave a very comprehensive discussion on the role of the health sector with respect to climate change, role of government and the role of businesses. So my point is, perhaps this can be a proposal on how civil society groups, in close collaboration with the Commission on Human Rights, can work together to use a human rights lens and a gender lens in climate change protection, or protection against climate change for this generation and thereafter. It's a tall order, but I think that maybe this is how I can contribute a little to this. Okay, I read the documents that you gave, and this was the prayer of the petition of the Greenpeace to the Commission on Human Rights. Let me just run through this. Essentially, it called for an investigation of carbon majors in relation to their responsibilities to the Filipino people. It sought the monitoring of vulnerable peoples and communities by the Commission on Human Rights regarding the impact of climate change. It sought a policy recommendation on corporate reporting of human rights in relation to the environment. It asked for a policy recommendation from the Commission on Human Rights on the accountability mechanisms and access to remedies of victims. It also requested for a notification of carbon majors and request plans on how to address the violations. And it also called for an executive action to call upon home states of carbon majors to address climate change related to human rights harms or violations. So this was the prayer of Greenpeace to the Commission on Human Rights. And my response was, oh my gosh, this is a narrative of David and Goliath, given the complex nature of climate change, and the Commission on Human Rights, which is here in the Philippines, as one of the commissions in Asia that is trying to address human rights violations. When you talk about human rights and you talk about the entirety of human rights, as pointed out by Dr. Paraso a while ago, he was only referring to the ECOSOC dimensions of human rights, the health question, the poverty question, and then he did mention also the conflicts or violations of civil and political rights can in fact contribute to the problems of climate change. So how can the Commission on Human Rights, does it have the capacity, does it have the mechanisms, the instruments to be able to address what is being asked for by Greenpeace? So let me try to go through the journey. Let's process this whole thing. I'd like to give a very brief framework on the historical development of human rights. I was given 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so I'll try to be very brief about this. But I think that maybe we should together give a historical view of the evolution of Human Rights, because we have to be fair to the Commission on Human Rights in being asked being asked to do the task that it is supposed to do. It's part of its mandate. But can it do it? The historical developments of human rights. Briefly, post World War II to the present showed us that the concept of human rights was institutionalized in the Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. In 1945, the United Nations Organization was set up, and it, for the first time, established and institutionalized the concept of human rights as a universal mandate that should be addressed by all members of the United Nations. It focused on traditional justice for about, very briefly, maybe from 1945 to 1948. And when I speak of transitional justice, I'm sorry, did I say traditional? I meant transitional justice. I think that what it meant was it was able to come up first with the United Nations Organization, and for the first time there was a global consensus for the winners, these would be the Allied powers, to come and seek remedies against the atrocities that were committed, both in at least in the Second World War. Traditionally, we hear about the massacres, the genocide committed by Hitler with the 6 million Jews that were killed. That included Jews, gypsies, communists, persons with disabilities, the gay community. All of these were considered dysfunctional, and the better to get rid of them so as to be able to enhance the Aryan race. That is the traditional official position that we keep on hearing about. When I was listening to Dr. Paraso a while ago, it reminded me of the truth about World War II. It was not 6 million Jews. It was really, that's for Germany, but the entire number of casualties as brought out by an American institution amounted to 50 million casualties, and that included close to 500,000, some would even say close to 1 million, in the Philippines. The atrocities that were committed in Samar. But that was only the casualties brought about by lethal weapons. Subsequently, it meant 30 million more were killed because of the toxic effects of the bombs on the waters and the soil wherever these bombs were dropped. And the bombs came from both sides of the fence. So, transitional justice sought for a never again position against this. It came out with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There are 30 articles, but I'd like to just focus on 3 messages of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. One is, never again, for the first time, we should come up with recognize the dignity of the human being. And the dignity of the human being can only be recognized when this human being is able to exercise and enjoy his or her human rights fully. The second point is that never again should violence and lethal weapons be used in the settlement of disputes. There should be diplomacy, there should be cooperation, there should be solidarity. Number 3, the ultimate and long-term role of the United Nations is to bring about sustainable, enduring peace that will give rise to the development of the nations, of their economies, and finally, to the enhancement of their human rights. So this is fundamental in transitional justice. There were trials in Nuremberg, there were trials in Tokyo, and we contributed our own trial against General Yamashita and contributed to the principle of command responsibility as a crime that had to be addressed. Okay, the right to environment was not addressed. Civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights were subsequent parts of the international human rights law that came from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But there was no focus on the right to environment, even given the fact that the environment was so damaged by the Second World War. So to me, that's important. So it is only now that we have, when was it, 2011, that we have this United Nations guiding principles that were adopted by the UN Human Rights Council. So I'd like to go straight to that. And that was, in fact, what started this whole thing about taking more seriously the question of environment from a human rights lens. So that's the framework. We add to that, the Philippines is now a signatory to 8 of 9 international human rights instruments. That's something we should be proud of. We're the only one in Asia who can hold ourselves to that position as a matter of policy. We are rich in human rights. We are, in fact, our constitution is rich in human rights provisions. I don't have to go into that, but it is considered human rights charter precisely because of its being an expression, a legal expression against all the atrocities that were committed by the Marcos regime. We are in the center, we are in the equator, the geographic and physical location of the Philippines puts us in the ring of fire. We have how many volcanoes? We have earthquakes, we've got 21 typhoons. So we're right smack in the middle of this, which means to say that the government should put a central focus on how we can in fact adapt and mitigate the harm that is being done by climate change. But we are a developing country, just pointed out a while ago. We contribute very little to the carbon emissions, and yet we are the recipient of the harm that is being done by carbon emissions that are produced by the major producers. 47 carbon producers, where did they come from? They come from the developed world. In the post-Marcos era, we had many environmental laws. I think that a lot of the NGOs have contributed to this. They're experts on this. We don't have to worry. The NIPAS Act, EPA, and so on and so forth. There is so much rich literature for the implementation of these laws for the benefit of the people. From our point of view, rights, responsibilities, and remedies in the context of common action and differentiated responsibilities is the main thing that I think we should be addressing. Using the Ruggie framework, I think the first point that we should look into is that when we look at the Ruggie framework, it talks about foundational principles, it talks about operational principles of 3 pillars. The first pillar is the state. Theoretically, we always say this. It's in all our human rights laws. The state is the primary, is the institution that is primarily responsible for the protection, the fulfillment, and the promotion of human rights. Therefore, when there is harm that is being done on people with respect to, other state actors or non-state actors like businesses, it is the responsibility of the state to come up with legislation that should, in fact, exact accountability from the non-state actors. Specifically, when we talk about the non-state actors like businesses, again, it was mentioned a while ago. We talk about its corporate responsibility, but more than just its corporate responsibility, where I understand we have the lawyers here who understand that, you're supposed to give an annual report on your financing. Maybe it's high time that these businesses come up with non-monetary reports, like their responsibility in their behavior with respect to health, with respect to poverty, with respect to the environment, and so on and so forth. So that covers responsibilities, the rights of the people and the responsibility of the state and the businesses to come up with legislation that should protect the rights of the people. But the third and very urgent question, and to me this is what it's all about, is the remedies. The remedies, whatever legislation, whatever responsibilities there are, must match, the action plans of the state and the businesses with respect to whenever the violations of the rights of the people are breached. So let's go to the next. What do you think, as far as the state is concerned, maybe the first thing that we should do is a national action plan on business and human rights. During my time, and Commissioner Karen is here now, so she knows exactly what I'm talking about, we engaged in a national action plan. It is not the Commission on Human Rights that makes the national action plan. It's not the civil society organizations. It is the state. But we did our best to try and engage the state in coming out with a national action plan. And we were able to come up. We held it in Malacanang. We had several, a series, in fact, of meetings where we had the GOCCs, we had the CSOs, civil society organizations, we had people in government attend a discussion on business and human rights. Maybe this is what is needed now, because I understand that there is no national action plan specifically on business and human rights that is integrated into the Philippine Development Plan of the current administration. Do we have that? I don't think we have that specific to the environment. Because if we don't have it, this is something that we have to address very specifically. But if you do that, you have to go into what are, it's a process. You have to have a process that should include the national context and the series of hearings that we've had. I don't know how many hearings you've had. We've had hearings even in the international community. That could serve as your baseline already. We have to have a baseline of facts and figures on human rights issues in relation to the environment. So you have your national context and the critical elements that should be looked into. Please, let's go to the next one. We should look into, it should always be based on the United Nations guiding principles. We should respond to the challenges. It was discussed a while ago, the witness in Sendong. I couldn't believe it, I know it is true, but until you hear them, 7 or 8 years after Sendong, and she does not have closure. She did not even have psychosocial therapy. And so she was crying all throughout. I felt, that is a gross violation of your human rights. How many witnesses of Sendong, how many, people in Iligan have not had closure? So there, you have to respond to these challenges. It has to be an inclusive process. There must be a system for monitoring and review. But what do we mean by a system for monitoring and review? We have to go to them. We have to go to the local government units. We have to go to the local police. We have to go to the barangay human rights action centers if there's none. We have to go to the child rights committee. We have to go to the small areas and we have to capacitate them. To me, that is precisely what the Commission on Human Rights can help do. Go to the villages, go to the barangays, develop, okay, so that's the national action plan that we have to challenge government to do. Remind. Then number 2, you have development planning and climate action. So what do we mean by that? A while ago, a number of SDGs were mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15 by Dr. Paraso. I think Goal 13 addresses the question of the urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. So already you have to talk about, he came up with very practical points, which I think should be addressed immediately and which I think should be supported by the Commission on Human Rights. This is just the health part. When he was talking about budgeting by the PhilHealth or studies made by PhilHealth, and that should be budgeted on specific diseases. He was talking about malaria. In my position, because I have COPD, I have my doctor, I visit him in the lung center all the time, and he tells me there are so many diseases right now that are not known to the doctors. And there is a position where trying not to use antibiotics. I guess the idea is because when the diseases are airborne and they come from the environment, you should not be using antibiotics, but anti-allergy medicine. This was explained by Dr. Paraso. But the pulmonologist who was explaining this to me says that even in the lung center, they have had casualties because of, people who came from abroad, brought the disease, was brought to the intensive care unit, patay lahat. Lahat ng mga doktor, ay yung mga pasyente dun sa intensive care unit, namatay. So, it's as serious as that, no? So I really appreciate the importance of the health question here. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. To do that, you have to capacitate your barangay health clinics for the primary health care. You have to capacitate your regional hospitals. You have to put a lot of budget in there rather than put budget in the military for military defense, although it is important for us, of course, to defend our territorial waters in the West Philippine Sea. Okay, number 3, ensure equity on any climate action. I want to be, gano'n katagal pa? Okay lang, matatapos naman na eh. I need it nice and short. Ensure equity on any climate action. Let's, in trying to secure the people, it should be non-discriminatory, but we should give emphasis to the vulnerable sectors. Yung matatanda, katulad ko, matanda na, yung mga people with disabilities, katulad ko, may disability rin ako, yung mga kababaihan, katulad ko, babae rin ako, no? I'm just using myself as an example, pero ito yung mga dapat binibigyan natin ng pansin. It should be non-discriminatory, but we should give emphasis to the vulnerable sector. Ensure equity on any climate action. Huwag tayong namimili. Dapat non-discriminatory. Dapat pantay-pantay lahat. Ang dami ko nang naririnig, whether it is the past administration or the current administration, na hindi efficient, hindi pantay-pantay, kung hindi selective kung minsan ang nagiging distribution. Ano ang pagkukulang doon? Magiging selective ang distribution kung ang mga agencies concerned, like the DSWD or the local government, the mayor, etc., meron silang mga pinipili. So, ano ang kakailanganin natin? Pasok sa Commission on Human Rights, dapat pantay-pantay. Dapat everybody is equal under the law, and magbibigay tayo ng diin dun sa mga, those who have, truism, those who have less in life, must have more in law. So yung mga hirap, yun ang dapat nating pinapansin. Pero dapat pumupunta tayo sa kanila. Kasi hindi pwedeng salita lang tayo ng salita dito sa labas eh. Kailangan dumidiretso tayo. I just came from Kabangkalan and I learned so much. I spent my Human Rights Day there, but otherwise I should have been here in the CHR. But I learned so much from them kasi pinuntahan mo yung mga tao. Number 4, we have to have a coherent state policy on non-financial reporting from corporations, such as information on GHG emissions and other climate risks. Walang police power ang Commission on Human Rights. Dito, ano ba yung sasabihan nitong mga malalaking 47 major producers, carbon producers, that you have to report? But the Commission on Human Rights is not alone. I think that the advantage of this inquiry, suntok sa buwan to eh. Diba? Suntok sa buwan. Ako nga, David and Goliath ito. Itong si Tochi. He is a good friend of mine. So I call him Tochi. Commissioner Cadiz. Suntok sa buwan. But that's what it's all about. DNP suntok sa buwan din yan. We never thought we would be able to get compensation and reparation for victims of human rights violations. But we were able to do it. Maraming problema, maraming flaws, but we were able to do it. No? So, marami pang mga kandiyan, marami pang mga ideas na, proposals na nangyari. We never thought we would be able to at least come out with a national inquiry of this kind. Pero here it is. And I strongly suggest that let's make this a baseline. Let's establish a baseline here. And I know that when you go abroad, you do your international solidarity work. And you get a lot of linkages, a lot of support from experts who, in the developed states, they have ways of measuring the carbon emissions because they have that kind of expertise. We don't have it here, but we can measure emitters like buses, emit pollution, like the fuel emissions, the factories, and so on and so forth. So maybe what we can do is to adapt what is possible dito sa atin, what is feasible. But there is one thing that I think we should in fact be approaching right now more than anything else before I end. I think that while we talk of a national action plan, and these are the challenges we give government, I'm ending right now, I think that we should start going to the locals. And in going to the locals, we should always be guided by certain principles that are fundamental from the UNGP. And this is to let people, the vulnerable sectors, have access to information and to participate actively. I was talking to the Vice President of the Kalumaihan in Iligan, and she was, while we were listening, it is that we must empower the people in the villages. So first and foremost, they have to have access and they have to participate actively. Number 2, there must be transparency and accountability in the work that is being done by government at the local level, at the national level, at every level, and also the businesses. Number 3, it must be non-discriminatory. And number 4, it must be sustainable and evidence-based. What do I mean by sustainable? And dito, they are all at fault. We set up our monitoring mechanisms. Ito nga, draft ito eh. Dito nakalagay yung CHR, development, code, etc. We set up our monitoring mechanisms. But do we sustain the continuous regular reporting of these monitoring mechanisms? Hindi eh. Yung hygiene workers, I just cite you, when I was chair, magtatapos na ako, when I was chair of the Commission on Human Rights, we went to Zambales, we went to Subic, and we were able to get the management of hygiene, the DOLE, sino pa? The workers, the local government of Zambales, of Subic, to discuss and dialogue on the casualties that were being killed sa hygiene workers. They were falling off the scaffolding, tapos namamatay o nasugatan, miles away ang ospital. Anong klaseng negligence yan? Mula rin sa gobyerno, mula rin sa, dun sa businessman, the hygiene company mismo. And ang risks involved dun sa mga workers, ang laki-laki. So, we worked on that and sabi namin, hindi na pwede yan. Kailangan magkaroon ng yung occupation hazards should be addressed. Dahil namin yung hospital dapat nasa tabi lang. Dapat hindi pwedeng ganun yung risks and so on. That was way back in 2013. A few months ago, nakita ko namatay na naman 100 workers from the scaffolding. Nahulog sa scaffolding. It's the same old story. And it goes on and on. Human rights impact assessment, matatapos na ako, just two examples. We worked hard against tampakan, dablaan. Tinuntahan namin yun with the help of a lot of civil society groups. And we had, the ambassador Ibu was a good friend of mine. Kakampi ko siya kasi pinakita ko lahat yung mga dokumento, pinadala ko sa kanya. Ito ang ginagawa ng Glencore, ito ang ginagawa ng mga multinationals ninyo dito sa Tampakan. Hindi pwede yung open pit minings. So kakampi ko na siya. Finally one day, I was still sure, sabi niya, Eka, guess what? Glencore has finally withdrawn. Really? But by that time, CHR was very busy talking to the security sector. We were having regional meetings with the PNP, with the military, with the Blaan tribes, we were divided, with the local government, talagang territorial, and then with the CSOs. So there was a lot of pressure that was going on. Then later on, afterwards, sabi niya, umatras ang Glencore. Bakit umatras? Not because of human rights, but because there was so much conflict. Kasi yung ginawa ng kumpanya at saka ng gobyerno, pinati yung Blaan, and they made them fight with each other, yung IPs. Diba? So, ang sama. So, dahil doon, pero nag-withdraw sila. So, tuwan-tuwa kami, and so on. So, anyway, now I think that we're reviewing the idea of opening up the mining venture again. Also, the Kaliwa Dam, and I don't know whether the Chikorida Dam is being addressed, and so on and so forth. No? So I'm ending up now that human rights is never offered on a silver platter. There are plenty of us, more of us than there are these few big businessmen and those in government who actually are interested in whatever investments there are. Investments are fine, but not if they violate your human rights. And that is the indivisibility of human rights. Its universality, its interrelatedness is such whereby you exercise your human rights, but never at the expense of the others. Because that is your responsibility. Rights and responsibilities can never be like. There's a lot of work to be done. I am inspired by Commission on Human Rights. I am inspired by Greenpeace. It's a David and Goliath story, but I'm used to this kind of stories. But when we come together, one of these days, we shall be able to tell those major carbon producers, you better, respect human rights. You better stop before it becomes too late. I end up by saying that because all of us are involved in the survival of the planet. But believe it or not, it takes us, civil society organizations, people's organizations, experts like the director of health, the doctor, and so on and so forth, to come together. And the Commission on Human Rights will have to be a ready collaborator in this effort. If we will do it and we continue with this, I think we will survive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magda. Your Honors, may you be allowed to ask
Please go
any
ahead.
questions? Okay. I'd like to take on the last statement. Rights and responsibilities could never be dichotomized. You mentioned also in your statement regarding the Ruggie principles, pillars 1 to 3. Specifically, I'll go on the pillar number 2, where you said that pillar number 2 regarding the responsibility of business enterprises to respect human rights in the conduct of its business and to address adverse impacts on their operations. Do you think the respondent carbon majors who are operating, who have presence here in the Philippines, like Shell, Chevron, Total, to name a few, are respecting the human rights of the Filipino people and or addressing the adverse impacts of their operations?
I'm very skeptical about multinationals. How do they look at the CHR? Maybe, they just ignore them. Ganun pa yan eh. Ganun yun. Because, they're global in their operations. And, the government, especially the government today, is not so keen on human rights. So the government today would be more interested in the kind of investments that can come in and less on the negative or adverse impacts of the behavior of these businesses here in the Philippines. That is why, as I said, in the National Action Plan, it's going to be a very big challenge because you're going to look at the supply chain, from upstream to downstream. At every step of the way, are human rights being respected? So, yun ang rigor ng documentation that we will have to be doing. And it is only by making sure of that can we get these guys to start paying attention to us. But we contribute to the efforts that are already being done by others from other countries. Against Chevron, against Shell, against these big guys. We will have to contribute to that. At this point in time, what is necessary is for us to establish our baseline and remind government that this is a mandate and it is its responsibility to come up with an integrated environment plan with sufficient budgeting. We talked about budgeting a while ago in order to address this seriously. I think that if the Commission on Human Rights and the civil society groups will come together and come out with a position addressing government, then maybe you will have some businesses listening in. At least they'll have their ears open. I'm sure that they're listening in to what is happening right now.
Building on that National Action Plan, Etta, what do you think can these business carbon majors play a role with?
Carbon majors
on that National Action Plan.
Yeah.
It's more on the government side. What do you think will be the role of the private sector, specifically the carbon majors in that National Action?
Oh, definitely. They have to respect human rights. They have to respect the legislation on environment here in the Philippines. We have to remind them of that. A while ago, when we were talking about the behavior of businesses. Such behavior must be guided by respect and compliance to the requirements exacted by our legislation in the protection of our environment. They have to do that. And as I pointed out very specifically, we have a corporation code right now, and the way I understand it, I tried to consult some lawyers. They say that these businesses are not required to report on non-financial behavior or activities. Maybe this is the amendment that is needed in the corporation code. They have to report on, there has to be an evaluation. How much contribution are you making to the carbon emissions? How much work are you doing for the reduction of your carbon emissions, and so on and so forth? This has to be done. Now, this necessitates technical support and expertise. But we have to address this. And we have to show them that we mean business. As pointed out a while ago, it's not business as usual for them. It's business unusual because there is more intensity and there is more frequency in the climate change that is ongoing now, whether it is drought on one hand or it is the water, the La Nina, that is going on. I never forgot that. That was the first inquiry that I attended here that Pag-asa taught me. It registered. Hindi na mababalikan yan. So, kailangan ipaalam sa kanila at ipaalam sa mamamayan.
Last question, you mentioned earlier about the Human Rights Action Center in the grassroots level. As I hear it, if I'm not mistaken, one recommendation would be to embed human rights impacts in the context of climate change, in which the petitioners would also want to recommend to this honorable commission. My question is, what do you think should be the components if there would be like a human rights and climate justice desk, if you may call it, with lack of a better term? What should be the components in that kind of desk?
Of that kind of a desk? Under the current climate, political climate, local government units are scared stiff. They're so scared. Even the human rights, mentioning human rights, gives them the goose pimples. They're scared. But if we do it openly, little by little, you will find out that there are quite a number of them that are interested. A desk maybe, we don't even have to call it human rights. Let's call it, I think they have a peace and order. Let's look at the barangay level or the municipal level. They have a peace and order council. Maybe within that peace and order council, you can start off with a desk on climate monitoring. Because if you have natural disasters, if you've got conflicts and so on and so forth, it brings about instability and destabilization in that area. So the peace and order councils or the development or even the development councils should be able to serve. You can have a program on development councils because the development must always be aligned along a rights-based approach, to sustainable development. So I think maybe either peace and order or the development council can be used to put in your climate desk for environmental protection.
That will be all, Ma'am Etta. Thank you so much. Your honors.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pedro. Okay. We have no further questions for the witness. Thank you very much, Ex-Chair Rosales.
Thank you.
Councils, we are actually 40 minutes ahead of time, so we will have an early break unless there are further manifestations on your part.
None, Your Honors. Our next resource person will be available to 1 p.m., Your Honor.
All right, so we would like to invite everybody. There is lunch prepared. And would you have administrative matters to discuss, Attorney Fernandez?
No, Your Honor.
All right, so we will now adjourn and resume at 1 p.m.